So once again, hello and welcome. Thanks for joining us today. I'm feeling very excited. This is our first Creators of Peace President's Lunch, and yay! Since the initiative began in 1991. We had been considering this lunch over the past 18 months, and our wonderful team and volunteers had initially planned to cook, and I would say, a wonderful lunch at the Initiatives of Change office and headquarters in London. We were really considering, an international cuisine. But of course, we all know that in March, the coronavirus put a stop to all our plans and plotting towards this president's lunch. So we all found ourselves having a pause. The pause was disruptive, but it also surprised us. It surprised us in the sense that it gave us space to think as individuals and as communities on how we could be of service. And we're all brought back to the basics of life. We're not yet out of the woods. It continues to test our resilience. And we all pray that we do not have, the second wave being predicted of the virus. But during the time, we have begun to define ourselves differently. Just a bit on the outline of the session this afternoon. We're going to have a conversation, a discussion on our topic for 40 minutes, followed by Q&A for about 30 minutes. And then we would have 15 minutes in breakout rooms in groups of 4 or 5 in a room to reflect on what we've heard. And for those who do not want to join a room, it's okay. Just don't accept the invitation on the screen to join a room. So there's no pressure there. But if you do want to join, you can also leave a room at any time by pressing the leave button. On the Q&A, like I said earlier, we also want to invite you to put your questions in the chat box during the discussion, and the tech team would pass this on to the speakers. So before we begin on the topic, we want to express our gratitude to Initiatives of Change UK and all our global Creators of Peace networks for making this happen. It's been quite a good collaboration. The IOFC, that's Initiatives of Change UK National Director, Paul Gutteridge, could not join us today, but we have a short message from him to share with you all. So I'm going to ask Elle to please play his message.
Good afternoon on this great occasion of the Creators of Peace President's Lunch. My name is Paul Gutteridge, National Director of Initiatives of Change UK. And although I can't be with you today, it's my eldest son's 25th birthday celebration, I wanted to send a quick message to wish you the very best for your time together. I'm delighted that IFC UK and COP UK will be working even more closely together in the near future. It's my belief that the vision and work of COP is vital for a world remade in every sphere, strata and sector of society as women engage in creating peace. Amina's special guest, Dr. Karambu Ringera and Canon Sarah Snyder, will bring a wealth of proven experience to share, and I know that you'll be inspired by their stories and insights. I believe that if we are to see a world remade, a world where there is genuine peace, we will need a multitude of spaces where people everywhere can be safe enough to encounter each other. Places where honesty is not simply sharing what we really feel and believe, but places where we can talk honestly about how we got here from there and then co-create the means to live in peace. This is not a peace where we lose our distinctives, but a peace where we can embrace, celebrate, learn from, and find enrichment that spills out into the world. Because after all, we're all connected to each other from the inside out. So with best wishes from me and the IFC UK team, take care and God bless. Paul.
That's lovely. Thank you. Thank you. So now just a bit about Creators of Peace and what we try to do for those of you, for whom it is the first time you're having an encounter with Creators of Peace. So the Creators of Peace, or we shortly call it COP, is a women's initiative that was launched in 1991 at the Initiatives of Change Conference Center in Co, Switzerland, by Honorable Anna Abdallah Msekwa of Tanzania. She is a respected politician and leader of her country's women's organizations. In her inaugural speech, she urged everyone to create peace wherever we are, in our hearts, our homes, the workplace, and our community. Creators of Peace is a part of Initiatives of Change, as you have just heard from Paul Gutteridge. And I of C is a network of people working to build trust across the world's divides. Like Paul, I also bring you greetings from Mama Anna Abdallah Msekwa, the initiator of Creators of Peace. So COP UK is part of an international women's initiative challenging women and men everywhere to engage in the creation of peace at every level of society. We also invite participants to share responsibility for their part in conflict and in its resolution. We also aim to build networks of forgiveness and friendship across racial and social divides, and create opportunities for healing ourselves, our relationships, and our communities. So that's just a short intro to Creators of Peace. You can read more on our website. And so now we're going to ask each one of you, our audience, what does peace mean to you? And for you to respond to this, Miranda would take us through a Mentimeter. We all participate in a Mentimeter on the question, what does peace mean to you? So Miranda, over to you.
Thank you, Amina. So hello, everybody. We have a fun tool to use. It's called Mentimeter, and I think Ella is going to pop the link into the chat bar in a moment. So the Mentimeter is a way for us to just see each other's thoughts on the screen together. So if you can all try following the link, which Ella is going to pop into the chat bar now, I think. And if you follow that link, so if you click on that link, it will bring you to a page where you can type in your answer to what does peace mean to you. So, and then I will share our answers with us all. So if you go to that page and then you can click in the box and type your answer and give that a go. And if it doesn't work for you, do feel free to write things in the chat bar as well. Let's see if that works. Wonderful. So I can see that some people are putting their answers in already. That's really wonderful. So I am going to share the answers with you now. There you go. Here's some answers what people are finding on there. So we've got love, freedom, presence, harmony, justice. Some of the bigger words on there. Beautiful. So there we go. There's some of the things that we find together to show what peace means for us. We also have unconditional love, quiet mind and heart, acceptance, harmony. Freedom to be yourself. Presence. Thank you all. In the comment bars, we also have humility to acknowledge failure and hurts, and generosity to forgive the other. Wonderful. Thank you, Amina.
Yeah, thank you. It's nice to have that kind of cloud, harvesting that wisdom from everybody. Okay, so right now, Elle is going to play a short video on a short video of Creators of Peace. Why be a peacemaker? So, Elle.
Because I believe that the world is more globalized today than it has ever been, and we live in community with neighbors coming from different backgrounds, from different religious backgrounds, from different nationalities, and from different race. And therefore, being able to be a peacemaker today is more important than it has ever been. I believe a peacemaker is someone who can be tolerant, compassionate, and understanding of other people, whether it's understanding of culture, or understanding of religious belief, and understanding of life values, and being able to respect that and live with that in tolerance and harmony.
Okay, now, thank you. Now, yeah, great. So that is a good introduction to our topic today, which is, the topic is Inside Out, Our Words, Our Destiny. So with words, we weave sentences, create stories and narratives that impact our lives and communities. Words can make or break. And following recent events around the world, it seems like there is a diminished space for real conversations in our contemporary culture. To explore this topic with me today, I have two special people, and I'm going to introduce them one after the other. First is Karambu Ringera, PhD. Karambu is from Kenya. She was born and raised in Meru in Kenya. Dr. Karambu earned her PhD in intercultural communication in 2007 from the University of Denver. She is also an adjunct associate professor at the University of Wisconsin in the United States. She is the founder and president of International Peace Initiatives and the founder the Amani Children's Home and an eco project called Tiriji. Tiriji means the place of abundance. Dr. Karambu is a recipient of many awards locally in Kenya and internationally. So Dr. Karambu, you're welcome. Our second special speaker is Canon Sarah Snyder. Sarah is a theologian and mediator, specializing in interreligious peace building and dialogue. She has worked for many years to promote faith-based reconciliation, most recently as the Archbishop of Canterbury's advisor for reconciliation. She has 30 years experience working in conflict zones. Sarah is also founding director of the Rose Castle Foundation, which is an international center for peace and reconciliation, offering a safe space in which to address misunderstanding of the other, particularly those of different religious traditions. So welcome, ladies. Welcome to you both.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I want you each to please tell us about yourselves and what you're doing now. You know, in 5 minutes each, if you can start with that. Karambu, do we start with you?
Beautiful.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Thank you so much, and for having me here this afternoon. I'm very blessed to share a few insights with you all. I have worked with international peace initiatives for the last 15 years. I actually started the organization in 2002 as a penniless international student at the University of Denver in USA, actually living on food stamps. But I came back home one summer and met a group of women, and they just inspired me to do something. And I'll share later about what I've learned from the work. But I am appreciative of that insight that came to me that I can do, I can work with the women in spite of the fact that I was a student. So the work I'm working on right now, the project I'm working on right now is the Amani Children's Home. Since March this year, coronavirus hit and the schools were closed. And so at home, I have 63 children that I have to keep meaningfully engaged, safe, healthy, and out of mischief. So it's been a beautiful dance, working with the kids to live and thrive, not just to survive this coronavirus year. That is my focus this year, the children. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah.
Thank you so much. You know, it is such an encouragement when you meet women like the two of you and others, no doubt, who are here today, whose heart echoes so much of what your own heart echoes. And I'm sure that's because there is a God out there who is the originator of all these seeds. But thank you, Karambu, for all you're doing. I actually spent a year when I was 18 in the Rift Valley in Kenya, living and working with the Maasai. And that built on an upbringing that I'd had in Bermuda. I was born and raised there during a time of a lot of racial discontent. My father was very involved in representing 3 Bermudian youths who'd been accused of the murder of the governor. And he believed they were innocent. They said they were innocent, and they were acquitted. They would have been on death row had they not been acquitted. And that was when I was around 7. And I think from that very young age, I really felt that there is a need for every one of us to listen more, to listen to the voices of those who are disempowered or those who don't have a voice in particular spaces. So that drove me to study as an anthropologist and then as a theologian. And the anthropology not only took me to lots of parts of the world that are ridden with conflict, but also taught me to really listen to the voices of women particularly, but also of many others, and to step into their shoes and try and faithfully listen and tell their story in ways that they feel they're being represented. So that anthropological training was really important. Actually, the theology training was also super important because I'd grown up also in a very conservative community that taught me that people who have different religious beliefs to my own are not only untrue, but actually are an evil in the world that need to be persuaded otherwise. And my experience living with the Tuareg, actually in Mali, who were a very prayerful Muslim community, taught me a whole new lens of being able to listen to others, even others who had such different religious beliefs to my own, and not feel I had to agree with them, but still that they are not only loved by God, but that I can love them too. So that's the background.
Oh, thank you very much. Just to remind our listeners, our friends who are with us here, please don't forget to put any questions on the chat box as we go along, but of course they'll be responded to towards the end. So Karambu, can I ask you, I know that often people make sweeping statements about other people, and then there is the question of labeling others. Can you shed light on this from your work experience? And how do we catch ourselves and transform our thinking from this sweeping statements and labeling of others?
Great question. Thank you. My learning about labeling, naming, and marking other people came alive when I started working with women living with HIV and AIDS. The women that I met in 2002 said, can I, Karambu, help them? And I said to them, I really don't know how to help people. Tell me how you want to help yourselves. And 7 of them had lost their husbands that year in 2002, and they didn't know what had killed them. But HIV and AIDS was rampant then. So I said, just go and get tested and see whether you're positive. All 7 of them were positive. So their children were partial orphans. And soon enough, I started coming across so many kids who had lost either one parent or both parents to HIV and AIDS. And in 2002, there was a lot of stigmatization and discrimination against people living with HIV and AIDS. People literally used to run away from them. And these women felt helpless and hopeless. And so I started thinking about, as a Kenyan who was getting educated in America, they thought I had a lot of money. They didn't know that I was really a struggling student in the States who lived on scholarships. And I realized that I had to change my view of them, indeed of the labeling of the disease, if I was to see the women as whole, complete, pure, and enough human beings worthy of their word, not so much what I said about them, but what they said about themselves. So what that taught me is that labeling is a community, a communal, a societal technique, probably to survive and understand when things are too tough for people to understand. And so stereotyping comes from that labeling. When we don't understand something, or when we want to make excuses, then we say, oh, this is how it has always been done. This is a cause of the disease. This is why they have it, and things like that. So what I learned was to reframe the terms that we use in this labeling or marking or naming, like I call it. And so what I felt is that what I learned is that I have to change the way I think about things, no matter that everybody else is talking about them in certain ways. The fundamental question for me was, what do I say about this thing? What do I see about these women that all these other people are not seeing? And to tell you the truth, today, the over 200 women that we worked with those days are all whole, pure, complete, and enough. They live, this is their own terming. They live positively with HIV and AIDS, and 95 of them are alive today. From the encouragement and the finding of who they are from the work that we did at that time. So really, labeling is not about another. It's about me and how I see myself in relation and in relationships with others. And when I know who I am and I see myself as whole, pure, complete, and enough, I can only see everybody else like that.
Can I come in, Karambu there? I listened to you on an interview, a couple of weeks ago, and I heard you talk about the moment you realized that you were living another person's narrative of you. It ties into this labeling. So could you tell us more? What was that how did you come to that self-discovery that you were living another person's narrative of you?
Beautiful story. I mean, beautiful question again. So that came from my own experience. I lived a certain circumstance that made me have dreams every day for about 2 years, where I saw myself with an incurable wound on my leg. And every night I had this horrible dream, and the wound was so bad and ugly. And one day I decided to just open it. What is this? And the bandage was so dirty because the wound was supposed to be so bad. And when I opened it, there was no wound. And I realized that the naming, the marking of the society of me, or what I thought they were saying about me from the circumstances that led to that naming, had led me to believe something about myself which was not true, that I had a wound. I had no wound. I was whole. It was so amazing. Other than teaching me that I can heal myself, like any one of you can heal yourself, it started me on questioning the markings that we give other people, but also the impact of that on us. So systems within which we live, for me, it was like, because I was a woman, largely that judgment was coming in. But even religion, traditions, capitalism also, education, all these systems have programmed us to think in certain ways. We think we are living our own lives, but we are really living someone else's agenda and story. Think about it. In Africa, for example, having a colonial education that still informs all our institutions, how has that led to the kind of continent that we have today? Women, a society that had named me, for example, as a Kenyan, as lesser than men, children, and even men's animals. The woman was at the bottom of the ladder. And so I learned that systems have conditioned me to think in certain ways, and it behoved me to reclaim my voice and my agency, but understanding that conditioning and understanding how I needed to get myself out of it, out of the boxes that these institutions have put us into. Yeah. That was my freedom. That was my liberation.
Karambu, you're getting me very excited because that relates very much to my story. But let's move a bit now to Sarah. Yes, I can go on that track, for a long time, because that's you. It sounds like you're telling my story. So Sarah, I have also listened to some of your talks, where you talk about the idea of seeing and hearing and the danger of living in a bubble. We overlook others. Can you expand, your thoughts on this, about seeing and hearing and the danger of living in a bubble?
Yeah, thank
Please.
you. And Karambu, thank you for what you shared there, which was very, very powerful. I think in the world we live in today, it's even easier to get stuck in an isolated bubble, particularly for younger folk who are surrounding themselves by a lot of social media. We like things and then we receive more of the things that we like. So we soon can live in an unreal world, if you like, that is constantly reinforcing the things that we like, or the things that are like us, or the things that other people think that we're going to like. And of course, what that does is it puts walls up around us, even if we're not aware that we're putting those walls up. And it also begins to create images of those on the outside of those walls on our side. So it's as if we sometimes hold a mirror up and we think, oh, those people, they're all like this because everybody in my bubble thinks they're all like this. So we create these often quite negative, difficult images of those on the outside of our walls. Sometimes those images we create are because of our knowledge of those people and our experience of those people. And sometimes those images are created because we've never met them. So they're all hearsay. But whichever one it is, we begin to relate to the image on our side of the wall instead of relating to the actual human beings on the other side of the wall. And of course, they're all doing the same thing too. So one of the ways in which I sort of try to think about reconciliation and peace building is being able to remove bricks in those walls so you can actually get a glimpse of the real person on the other side of the wall. If that's physically possible, then physically, but if it's not physically possible, through the eyes of those who also live with them or are part of their community. And that, the name for that is this rehumanizing. It's this idea that we need to understand the humanity of those who we are different to or who we dislike. And I personally believe that when Jesus tells us to love our enemies and to pray for those who persecute us, he's really asking us to do that, to take some of the bricks out of our walls and to look face to face with those on the other side. And I suppose the one thing beyond that is to say that very often our worst enemy is in fact right in here, it's ourselves. And we have put walls up against ourselves because we actually hate ourselves. And I think Jesus knew that too when he asked us not only to love our enemies and God and our neighbor, but also to love ourselves.
Sarah, I know you also talk about fractures within, the internal and external fractures. Yeah, do you want to shed a bit of light on that?
Yeah, I mean, if you think of reconciliation as meaning healing what is broken, we all experience brokenness. We experience brokenness in our relationship with God if we are a believer. We experience brokenness within ourselves. We experience brokenness within our immediate families, with our neighbors, with our communities, and brokenness with the world around us. So at every stage, there are these fractures that we're living with. And sometimes we're aware of those fractures. Sometimes we're not aware. We never cross them or we never go near to the edge of them. But in order to seek the shalom, the salam, the peace, the wholeness that peace really describes, we have to be aware of the ways to heal some of those fractures. And I really believe that requires relational healing. It requires a healing of relationships with other people, with God, within ourselves, and actually also with the environment around us.
Okay. I'll come back to you, Sarah. Thank you so much. So, Karambu, How can we change the narrative? Or as you put it, reclaiming wastelands. I'm quite curious about those wastelands. You know, what's that? You know, what do you mean by wastelands? And how do we go about reclaiming, you know, the space, reclaiming who we truly are?
Beautiful question. Thank you, Sarah, for what you just shared. It's actually beautifully stated, and it aligns with reclaim. The fractures that need to be reconciled and healed within us are actually what I call wastelands. Yeah. And wastelands are circumstances that we encounter in our lives, and they stop us from seeing our power. I say the tragedy of our people is when they don't know who they are. I don't know who I am. We don't know who we are because of the fractures that we've encountered in our lives that we have not reconciled and healed. So in working with women living with HIV and AIDS, children who have lost their parents because of HIV and AIDS, I realized that we have various wastelands in our environment. It can be an actual piece of land, like a rocky piece of wasteland they gave us, the community gave us to build the children's home because they felt that the children are orphans and they are lesser than probably their own children. So why give us a nice space to build a children's home for them? So we were given this piece of rocky wasteland. And I realized that there's human forms of wasteland too, women living with HIV and AIDS, all those people that we marginalize. And marginalization is actually a creation of society so that we can help other people. And so there's human wasteland, like HIV and AIDS or like an orphan. But I realized that the worst form of wasteland is the mental one within ourselves and the heart one, where we have created these boxes or barriers that stop us from seeing other people as whole, pure, complete, and enough. What we don't realize is that really that is the condition that is within me. And that is why I can't see others in this way. So what I've learned is, what I learned from the work was, how do I reclaim the environmental and human wastelands? And so I made reclaim an acronym. The R stands for taking responsibility. Remember, I'm working with women who think they're dying any minute, and they feel so helpless and hopeless. And I said, we need to take responsibility of our circumstances. This disease, this situation of not having a parent, and you know how a kid feels lost when they've lost their parents. And I'm saying we need to take responsibility, because to take responsibility means understanding my circumstances, embodying it, and owning it. To understand means also to create awareness, to understand this situation fully, so that I can hold the bull by the horns. And that's the only way that I can overcome, when I take responsibility. To take responsibility also has an element of being accountable. The E stands for empoweredness. Empowerment is what we do for someone, what someone else does for us. Empowerment is what someone else does for us. Empoweredness is what I choose to do with that gift. A gift is not a gift unless it is given and received. So there's no way I can say that I'm trying to do something for someone. If they don't receive it, that's not a gift. So empoweredness is a space of grace. It's a space of recognizing what I have been given, the gifts that have been given, both within me by God and by people in the relationships that I have, within family, within community, and so on. So that is empoweredness. The C stands for courage. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is in spite of the fear, I stand. I take the step that I need to take. It takes courage to live my empoweredness and my responsibility, because when people are marginalized, they feel that they need someone to help them. And this is also another construction of society, we have those people that need to be taken care of. And the L stands for love and light. I believe that everybody is born with divine love and light. No matter what layers of other stories that we have garnered to close our eyes to, that we have love and light, divine love and light. Each one of us is born with that. The A stands for adjustiveness. I didn't use the word adapt because adapt is what we do when we go somewhere and we just adapt. Adjustiveness is what a river does when it's flowing from the mountains to the ocean. It comes across many, many obstacles, but a river never stops to have a conversation with a boulder, asking it to get out of its way. The river finds a way to the river chips away the rock or finds a way around the obstacle. I call that dancing with life. We are called to dance with life, and the divine has given us everything we need to be able to dance with life. The I stands for intuition, which I call divine wisdom. You know, we live in our heads and our thoughts, and we think that is life. We forget our heart. Intuition is divine wisdom, which we are given to balance between our crazy thoughts and, you know, so to bring balance in life. Intuition is divine wisdom, really. And the M stands for mindfulness. And for me, mindfulness is about being present in my life. Every moment, I'll just give you an example of when I ask a woman, the women that I used to work with, even today, when you ask a woman, what did you do today? They tell you nothing. I say, wow, nothing. So when did you wake up and when did you go back to sleep? And they woke up at 4 a.m. and they slept at 1 a.m. And I'm like, all these hours you did nothing. So they start renumerating what they did from when they woke up, they cleaned up, they made breakfast, they went to the shamba, they went to the women's group, they did a trillion things. And I say, that's a silo. That's a box within which we live. To see how I will complete all these things in a day. And I forget all around me, outside of that silo, that's where God is. So I'm praying for something to be offered, to be, you know, for an answer to an issue. It was offered a long time ago up here. But because I'm in my silo, in my box, I didn't see the answer. And I live thinking my answers, my prayers are never answered. So reclaim is about, you know, reclaiming, using those tenets, every form of wasteland that is real or created by my lack of understanding of my circumstances. But for me, the mindfulness part of it, being present, is really very powerful, because when my head goes crazy, I need to stop. You know, like the Bible says, I'm a Christian, so excuse me if I use my Bible verses. Be still and know I am God. So that stillness that removes my craziness allows the divine essence to come and inform me. I'll tell you, Amina, most of my most difficult circumstances, I never found the answer from my mind. I found the answer from, it feels like a downloading of some other wisdom that just comes. And I have an amazing answer for something that I was like, how will I ever get out of this? Wow. It is real when I pay attention, when I reclaim my agency, my voice, my heart, and balance it with my thoughts.
Wow. Karambu, you are wonderful. So physical and mental wastelands, responsibility, empoweredness, courage, love and light, adjustiveness, intuition, mindfulness. Thank you for that. You know, that's very powerful. Yeah. So Sarah, I've just been thinking, what, you know, from the work you do, bringing the people of different faiths together at the Rose Castle, what does it mean to be a reconciler? You talk about the wounded healer. What does that mean? How can our words make or break our destiny? It's a lot of things packed in those questions, but you know where I'm going with this. So Sarah,
Yeah.
any lights? Can you shed any light on this?
Gosh, thank you. I think I'm going to first of all tell you a quick story of a time when we've done a lot of work with Palestinian and Israeli communities, and one of the times I remember so well, I'm actually godmother now to their children, was one of the Palestinians, a visceral fear as he came into a shared space that we had opened up for Palestinian groups to meet with members of the Israeli Defense Force. And we consider the meal table to be a really important part of the work that we do. In many parts of the world, you won't sit at the same table to eat with your enemy. So even the fact that you'll come to the same meal table, if you will, is a sign that you are willing to think about peace, even if you're not yet ready to act on that. And so he came to the meal table on the first evening, and he sat next to me, and halfway through the meal, he was watching a lot of the Israelis on the other end of the table, and he said, you know, I never knew that Israelis smile.
Excuse me.
and the reason he didn't know that was not because Israelis don't smile. Israelis have a wonderful smile, and they smile a lot. It was, of course, because he'd only met them in situations where they too were afraid, quite probably. It was at checkpoints, just around his village. There is a place that he has to cross every single day to get to his fields, so he's always having to go through another security check. So he had only really met Israelis who were also afraid in frontline positions. So that was the start of a very significant journey for him, where he was able to watch and to listen to the stories of his so-called enemies. And of course, it was stories that they told about him and his people. And it was stories that he didn't recognize. They weren't his story of his own people. And likewise, they were able to sit and listen to his story of them, told in ways that they too didn't recognize. So that was the beginning of a journey. And that's something that is at the core of all our Rose Castle programs, where we allow people to listen, not to interrupt, but to listen to the stories that others tell of us. And then for us to tell our stories of them. And then, of course, to move into the stories that we tell of ourselves, of our suffering. And the point of that is not to rubbish what's happened. It's not to write out the story of suffering and fear and vulnerability and all the other aspects of our past or even our present, but it is to hear the ways in which we each tell the story of each other. And that begins a journey of reconciliation. And I think, you know, the reconciler, I've been doing a lot of thinking about what are the core habits of a reconciler. And one of the first, apart from lament, which is actually to recognize the wrongs that are being committed and to, you know, lift them up, to shout about their wrongness and to want to do something about them. The next habit is really curiosity, the interest to ask questions. Why are you like that? What is it that makes you behave in that way? Why do I believe you're this kind of person when actually you tell me you're this kind of person? So those questions are really, really important as the first stage of being a reconciler. And then the only, there are others, but the other one I'll just say in a short space of time is the gift of hospitality. What does it mean actually not to be the host always, to say, come into my space, come and hear my story, come and eat my food, come and understand me, but actually to be somebody else's guest and to be a risky guest in spaces that we find uncomfortable. So if we're in a church community in a northern British city or Cumbria, where I am right now, actually going and sitting in the mosque at the feet of our Muslim neighbours and eating their food and hearing about their experience of living here in Cumbria would be one way of being somebody else's guest. And we've all got our own stories of that. But being a risky guest, of course, Jesus was always a risky guest. He didn't have his own home. So he became a host in many, many ways, and we could talk endlessly about that. But he always started his encounters as somebody else's guest.
Sarah, sounds like you're describing Co in Switzerland. You know, meal times, yeah. You've been to Co before, you said. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. I will switch back to Karambu. Yeah, going back and forth. Karambu, I think my question now is your perspective on the current happenings on Black Lives Matter. You know, sometimes, you know, I've wondered, you know, does this campaign on Black Lives Matter, is it an issue in Africa, in Kenya?
Thank you. And thank you, Sarah, for your sharing. That was beautiful. Being a risky guest.
Yeah.
Black Lives Matter, the movement, is actually about justice. And justice is something that is relevant everywhere in the world. All these institutions that human beings, especially man, all these institutions that man has created, racism, sexism, patriarchy, traditions and culture, and even capitalism, all these institutions, as long as they're created to serve a few at the disadvantage and discomfort of the majority, that's an issue of justice. And everywhere where there's injustice, the story is the same. In Kenya, we have something we call tribalism, and it works in the same way, because you find a group of people discriminate against other for reasons that are really not valid. And even if they were valid, it is not justified to kill someone, to harm someone, when there's an opportunity to bridge the misunderstanding or to bridge the disconnect. Or for me, it is also an aspect of how human beings have failed to understand what Mother Teresa said. We don't have peace because we've forgotten we belong to each other. When we remember that we belong to each other, when we remember that we are so interconnected, like COVID-19 has come to remind us, when we remember that really Ubuntu teaches I am because we are, when we are reminded of that interdependence, then we'll do no harm to another. And also we've forgotten our humaneness. You know, I say Ubuntu is who I am in community. I am whole in community. Utu is a Swahili word that for me means humaneness. So how do I live my Ubuntu? What informs my being human? That humaneness is what I call Utu. And Utu is really the essence of the love and light that I know that I am. You know, like you ask me who I am, I'm not the things that I do. I'm not the education that I got. I'm really, Karambu is love and light. And to find who really I am in that I am love and light is a process that I had to go through to peel out all the societal namings and markings and labelings that we talked about earlier, so that I really reclaim who I am. And when I'm in that space of that knowing, of finding and living my Utu every moment, then that is my calling, is to find how I hold that Utu so that someone else can find their Utu. And as long as that is not happening, the Black Lives Matter movement and all those other injustices that human beings are causing others will be. But it is my responsibility to be that which I want to see. Like Martin, you know, like, let me be the change that I want to see in the world. And it's not just words, it's actually living that. And it's not just doing and living, it's also being that. so that I
Okay.
hold a space for someone else to be that for themselves too and for another.
One more question for Sarah. Just looking at, in the course of your work, you talk about the difference between disagreeing and understanding, and the power of deep listening. Could you tell us about the deep listening, in trying to reconcile people or different peoples?
Thank you.
Yeah.
One of the things I was just thinking then that's so important about listening is to remind ourselves that listening to someone doesn't mean we agree with them. We're born into a world where it's quite a binary world. So if I'm right, that means you must be wrong. And we even learn that in the classroom at school. But actually, that means that often when we're listening in order to then correct someone or to put across a different point of view. And actually, the kind of listening that you need when you're dealing with severe conflict, I'm mostly in situations of violent conflict, and that's words and actions, of course. The kind of listening that's required is a listening that doesn't mean I agree with you, because if we agree, we're compromising who we are, and whether that's a religious compromise or a cultural compromise or an ideological compromise. We're not always able or willing to compromise in that way. And yet we can still listen to people with whom we profoundly disagree. And that's a really important move for us to understand. In order to be reconcilers and peace builders, we are going to have to listen to people with whom we profoundly disagree. And that's the starting point. It doesn't mean that we are wanting to seek a compromise. It probably does mean that we will be coming up with new and innovative ways to work together, to collaborate together, despite our differences. So there is that, if you like, end goal of collaboration that is there. But collaboration doesn't need to mean compromise on the beliefs that we hold very dear.
Thank you both so much. The questions have been, pounding back and forth here. So as you can imagine, it's been a very interesting listening to you both and getting your insights. So we would have a moment now. This segment is for the Q&A. Please keep sending your questions in. I have a question here. Dr. Karambu, thank you for your insights. I truly admire your work and your perspective. Well, this is not a question. You are fond of the importance of unlearning, learning, and relearning.
Yes.
Please tell us a little about that.
Beautiful question. Thank you. In understanding the learning that my work brought to me, I created something that I call the transformation dialogue. And it's a chart that begins with the question, who am I? Understanding who I am, understanding what stops me. And when I understand who I am and what stops me, recognizing that sometimes the biggest stopper of myself is me because of the beliefs that I have in my head, then I create a new story. And so that when I create my new story from this understanding, I have to look for allies who I can work with now within my new story. And so when I come to the point of the actions that we do and the beingness, the utu-ness that informs those actions, then we reflect on what we have accomplished. And that is when I talk about the question of what is emerging in my beingness, what is emerging in my work and how I do it, and what am I learning? Because the journey of finding who I am, what stops me, and creating my new story is a journey of learning what has stopped me or what has brought me to where I am today, and learning what doesn't serve me, relearning what will move me forward, moving forward with my new story, and then growing.
Mm-hmm.
So I am unlearning, I am relearning, I am learning anew so that I can grow and thrive.
Mm.
And it is deeper than just me explaining it like this, but I pray that you people who are listening get that it is a journey of always, when I accomplish something, I say, this is where I am today, this is who I am becoming, because I believe I never arrive and become and complete, otherwise I'm dead and 6 feet under, buried. But it is a process of always awakening, renewing every day and removing things that are not serving me, and being present to what is the new thing that is calling to be lived in me today. Most of us think that we have a life that we are living. For me, this process is about always asking, what is the life calling to be lived in me now, today? Okay. I don't have a life, but there's a bigger life that is calling to be lived through me. And that's where I enact, I be my love and light every moment of my life.
By the way, that's a question from Joy Mbabu, and I guess you know her. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr.
Yeah. Yes. We have a question here from Nadia, and she asked, how does creators of peace define peace? Or how do you, any of the two of you, define peace? I think this, within creators of peace, this is, is there a definition of peace? One of the exercises we do in our peace circles is to find out, what does peace mean to you? Just like what we did at the beginning, with our Mentimeter. So we go through that and discover, for some people, it is being able to provide food on the table. Food security will give them peace. For others, it is for the guns to stop. For so many others, it is that they can go out and come back home without, having to look over their shoulders. And so, peace varies from place to place, but it's also the peace that comes from within us, the mindfulness, that Dr. Karambu was talking about, the peace from within. And getting those qualities to make us better at listening to others. So we don't have one specific definition of peace, but one where we can accommodate others and be at peace with ourselves as well. I don't know if Sarah, you have anything to add. Do you have any definition for peace?
I think I would just add that peace, I see peace as wholeness, as like a circle joined. And for me, a major part of peace is knowing that we are loved by God and loved by others. And not everybody has that experience. So it's an ideal that we're seeking, a place where we know that we are made in the image of God and loved by him, which is something that every one of us has access to. So I think it's the if you like, the reconciled reconcilers, that we are able to reconcile with others because we ourselves can be reconciled with God. There is something about that completion of the circle that I love to think about when I think about peace.
Yes. And I think, here comes also the question of our daily practices of, observing inner listening, like you both have, inferred in what you have shared, inner listening. What's the journey for you? I know for me, there was, situations in my family where it was just all terribly noisy, and I couldn't find a space, to find my own inner peace. But because it has become a lifestyle, even in the midst of the noise, I could just find my corner, close my eyes, and just be able to tune myself in and seek divine wisdom within the, in and amongst the noise around me, to find something. So that is due to practice. So I don't know Dr. Karambu, you talked of mindfulness. Do you have any particular personal practice or daily practices for inner listening?
Absolutely. Mindfulness and presence. Presence, being present in my life every moment. So the first thing that I do when I wake up is I say, today is a good day.
Okay. Now the network has been brilliant so far for you. Now it's dragging a bit. Okay, let's see. Sarah, are you happy to shed any light on this, on inner listening, before we get Karambu back?
Daily practices, yes, and thank you, Karambu. I was just thinking, what a beautiful way to start your day by actually. So I would really tune into that and say that I love to start and end the day with gratitude, and that's being thankful to God for a new day, whether this is a day that heralds difficult things, which it often does, or whether this is a day that is a day of hope. I think an attitude of gratitude is one that we can cultivate as a habit. If we start every day by being thankful for something or someone, and then through the day, there are lots of moments where I really try and notice things, whether it's gratitude for the big clouds that are just hanging over the mountain outside the window here, and the fact that we have clouds and rain and green, or whatever it is. So cultivating the habit of gratitude.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to quickly go to the question from Howard and Maria Grace. He says here, last year my wife and I had the great pleasure of spending a night at Rose Castle, along with Letlapa Mpalele. Yeah, Sarah, I think you met them.
Yes. Lovely to have you here. I noticed you.
Yeah, so he has gone through a deep experience related to being forgiven by the mother of a victim of a massacre, which he had ordered. We really appreciated our conversation with you, Sarah. Letlapa is an atheist. I wonder what you thought about this experience of a non-religious person. So this is to you, Sarah.
He was an absolute inspiration. He spoke about the very deep, raw, personal experience of being forgiven when you yourself are the perpetrator. And there are many, many examples we encounter in our work at Rose Castle of people who are on either side of that, whether they are able to forgive someone face to face for an atrocity that they committed at the hands of one of their loved ones, or whether they themselves are the recipient of that forgiveness. The power of forgiveness can never be underestimated. It is this whole concept, if you want to frame it in a less religious language, it's this idea of letting go. Either us letting go, breaking the chain between a perpetrator and a victim, not by saying what happened didn't happen, but by saying what happened did happen, and I actually forgive, I hand you over, I let you go as the offender. I'm not going to hold on to being your victim or on behalf of somebody else for them to be your victim. So I think there is something very powerful about an ability to let go of a broken relationship. And that can happen even when the other person isn't remorseful. And it'd be too big a subject to go into now. But that's what we spoke about, and how it was a very, very precious time we had with you also. Thank you.
I think, Sarah, this may be another question for you, would see. So it's for both you and Karambu, if we get her back. This is a question from Renu in India. She's in Mumbai, India. What are the special challenges that you have faced while dealing with youths who have stereotyped the other faiths or other communities? So this is about dealing with youths who have stereotyped the other faith communities.
The language of, is Karambu back on? Because it'd be nice for her to respond first, if she is.
No, she's not back yet.
So I was going to say that the language of young people, but not just young people, of all of us, of hate. It is visceral. And of course, we encounter that a great deal in our work, because all of our work is about bringing enemies into a shared space. So it's dangerous work in some ways, dangerous for them more than for us, because it's frightening spaces that they're coming into. But we've done a lot of work before they physically enter that shared space. But the language of hate towards the other is deeply, deeply hurtful. And so we have all sorts of ways in which we can create isolated groups where they can, mix up the groups. Sometimes we have groups of all women, that works really well, and all men in separate spaces. Sometimes we will stop the words and turn into sport or some other kind of activity instead, to play out some of the relationships. But always we will have this exercise where you have to listen to the views of the other side without responding. You're not allowed to respond and say, no, it's not like that. No, that's not true. And it's actually initially an enforced listening practice where people aren't used to listening to those that they disagree with. But through that enforced listening, knowing that they're going to have their own opportunity to speak too, there is the beginnings of the foundations of understanding. And again, too long to explain here, but we often do an exercise which is literally naming all those hurtful names that are used, stereotype names, and we build a wall, and it'll say things like murderer, all sorts of very negative names. We'll build a wall, and then we will look at how do we dismantle those bricks with each of those names on, once we've actually met and heard from the people on the other side.
Yeah, I think two things from my end is I have found the challenge of young people, but not just young people, as you've said, Sarah, not fully understanding and comprehending the depth of either their faith or their cultures. Yeah. And so just sometimes having literal meanings to scripts, and not going the deeper, dimension, which has a broader space to accommodate all others. So there is a limited knowledge of the holy books or holy scripts. Yes. So that is one dimension, I guess.
And I think many of them have also had a greater degree of like-mindedness wrapped around them because of the world that they live in, the globalized world that they live in. They're able, without realizing it, to shut out the voices of those they don't particularly like. And therefore they really are living very often in tribes that are self-made tribes. And actually young people, one of the things I found is there is a desire to break out of those tribes, a wonderful desire that can be tapped into. They don't want to necessarily live in those isolated bubbles. So once you begin to introduce them to people from another world or another tribe, there is a curiosity, a natural curiosity that often kicks in. It says, oh, I didn't realize you might be like that, or you might feel that.
Yeah, one practice that our friends, the Imam and pastor from Kaduna in Nigeria, that they do in their workshops is to one group to say what they like about the other person, about the other group. So there is that, exchange of what they like, and people are, thoroughly shocked. Oh, do you think that of me, of our group? So that is always a surprise. Yeah. Okay. Welcome back, Karambu.
Thank you.
Yeah. I have a question here. This is from Magalam Lena from Canada. The question is for Sarah. I relate with I relate with you when you share your experience of listening to the different groups. Please tell us how to bring two ethnic groups together when they don't want to do so. I guess, Sarah, and I'm sure Karambu may have an experience.
I'm sure Karambu will have huge experience too. I would say always start with the women. I did some work with UN Women, and I realized that there was so much emphasis on women as the victims of violence, which women are. that we were losing the emphasis on women as the peace builders, women as often the first responders in violence, the first ones to even to de-escalate conflict before it gets to the violent point, but also those who look after anyone who has been hurt by the violence, whether it's words or action. So start with the women, and we have so many examples, whether it's South Sudan or Uganda or many parts of the world, where the women are able to cross lines even in the midst of violence that the men are unwilling to do. And whether that's bringing food or bringing medical care or just speaking to young men, or very often, or young people, to their sons, to their nephews, and to their husbands, to de-escalate the violence. So yeah, I would say begin with the women on that.
Thank you. Karambu, any insights on this?
Absolutely. In the New Generation Leaders program that we do, we had an experience of inviting some Muslim youth, and they're from Somalia, and then we had Kenyans, and we had people also from South Sudan, and the Al-Shabaab talk in Kenya was that there was a young man from Kenya who, even though they were in the same activity group with this Muslim kid, carried like a burden because his brother was killed in Somalia because he was serving in the military. And we have an activity where we talk about our woundedness, the things that have really hurt us. And it was through that conversation that this Kenyan man actually revealed what he carried against the Muslim kid. And it was through a conversation, a facilitated conversation, that they understood the erroneous ideas they carried about each other, because Mohammed, for example, was just Mohammed. He himself shared how his family had suffered from Al-Shabaab because they didn't support them. To cut a long story short, I think one way that I have found in building bridges across, whether it's tribes or gender or stuff like this, is when people are brought together and they hear each other's stories. That really begins the process of healing for people. Because when, like Sarah said, when I hear someone else's story as told by them, but also in the way that I tell it, and I hear my story as I tell it and as told by someone else, that really shifts the ground for understanding, both for myself and for the other. I have this African proverb that I like sharing that says, until the lion learns to write, the story always glorifies the hunter. As long as we allow someone else to tell and to write our story or our understanding of someone else's story, that there is a problem right there. So the invitation is listening, deep listening, like Sarah shared, without judgment, and recognizing that we all have things that need to be healed. And so from that place of vulnerability, know that someone else deserves for me to listen to them. But the most important thing is, do I listen to myself first? Because if I don't know how to listen to myself, it's very hard to listen to someone else. So it all begins within me.
Please, can you re-say that proverb again about the lion writing its own story?
Until the lion learns to write, the story always glorifies the hunter.
That's a deep one. That's a deep one. Okay. Yeah, and yeah, okay. Thank you very much. I think I'm going to stop the Q&A here. Thanks to all who sent in their questions, and special thanks to Karambu and Sarah. We're not finished yet. We'll be going into breakout rooms. Elle and Miranda, am I on track? we'll be going into breakout rooms to, have conversations on all that we've heard. So on the personal, how has it come across to you? What have you learned? What have you picked up? What can you share from your own experiences? So this is the time, for us to go into smaller groups, groups of 4s and 5s. So please feel free to share there. We have 15 minutes for this, and we'll get prompts from one of our tech team, halfway through the conversation, and also 2 minutes to the end of the 15 minutes. You'll be prompted to come back to the main room. So over to the tech team to send us all out into breakout rooms. Thank you. Welcome back. Hi. Good. Okay, now I think I'm going to invite my guests, Karambu and Sarah, for their wrap up to this segment. And I think what I would love to hear, apart from what they personally would like to share as a wrap up, is what their own personal practice look like, and how that informs their actions, their own personal practice in peace, in the area of reconciliation and peace building and peacemaking. So Karambu, can I invite you to start?
Yes, I'm happy to begin. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just report that we had an amazing breakout session with Caroline and Nadia. It was beautiful.
Good.
My practice is when I peeled the layers of societal naming and marking, and I knew who I am as love and light, I endeavor to live that every day in my life. So my practice, I would say, is love and light. And I'm not saying that I successfully live that every day. But my intention every morning when I wake up and I say, today is a good day, I create the possibility for that day to be all that I intended to be. But more importantly, that I be all that I need to be to bring Utu into everybody that I encounter that day and everything that I do that day. So I'm a spiritual person. I also do mantras. They are words that I say every day when I am praying for health, wealth, peace, love, healing, whatever it is. They are words that I say. For example, I'll share this one in closing. I say, God is the source of all my needs. God is the life principle within me, and I know I am alive. And all my needs are met at any moment of time, at any moment of time and point of space. God's wealth, if I'm praying for wealth, or if I'm praying for health, I will say God's health flows freely, joyously, and ceaselessly in my experience. I give thanks for God's health forever circulating in my experience. I also love to pray the Lord's Prayer, the prayer that Jesus taught us. I said I'm a Christian, so that's how I what is it called? I ground my faith also. So I love to say the Lord's Prayer because it means a lot to me too. So my practice is love and light. How do I be that every day for myself and for everybody I encounter and everything that I do that day? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karambu. Yeah. Sarah.
Lots of different ways of answering this. I think I would love to start by the reminder of what it means to be loved by God, because it's only because I know that I'm loved by God that I can find space within my soul to love others, even difficult others. And I think building on that is the question that I always ask, and I don't think I'm the only one who's got this level of curiosity. I always say, what's it like to be you? What is your story? And I notice how helpful that is in every experience of disagreement or conflict that I find myself in, that when you ask that question, it breaks the immediate leap that we so often make, which is, why are you doing that to me? Or why am I in this situation? I want you to know my story. So it's what's it like to be you? And then the third thing, which I am really passionate about, is making time for the next generation. We live in a world where hierarchy and ageism often works in many of our cultural contexts, and young people don't always, that they're often not heard. And I have daughters and granddaughters as well, grandchildren. I was saying to Amina, we have our daughter's just gone into hospital to have another one of our grandchildren today. But I know how much it means to young people when those of us who are older take time to listen to them and take time to affirm them. And even when we all make mistakes, take time to journey with them in learning from those mistakes. So I think those are all practices I'd love to share. I get it wrong lots of times, but ultimately it would be lifting everyone we encounter, whoever they are, in prayer, recognizing that God is the God of reconciliation. We're only a single pair of hands and feet. We can do what we can, but I personally believe God is the only one who is the ultimate reconciler. So lifting everybody we meet up to him in prayer is deeply important to me.
Yeah, on top of that, I will thank you very much, Sarah. I just want to capture my own thoughts with this quote from R.T. Bennett. You are not the victim of the world, but rather the master of your own destiny. It is your choices and decisions that determine your destiny. And yeah, I very much use prayer in my own life and reflection, and being also within that reflection, being available for the unexpected. And that's often a gift, something you were not thinking about, suddenly it lands. And when you obey and you act on the thought, the things that follow are really, surprising and empowering. But also the power of honoring another person, respecting, and not to forget in the course of life to enjoy the process of the peace building, peacemaking, and making wonderful friends from those we thought as the other. So once again, thank you to everybody who's been able to join us here, especially to Karambu and Sarah for all the insights they've shared with us. My thanks also go to Initiatives of Change UK, to our tech and communications team, to IFC, that's Initiatives of Change International Family, who constantly support us, and for our Creators of Peace brothers and sisters around the world. And Mary Lynn did that interview of me. I don't know those of you who have read it. We am grateful to her for that. Creators of Peace UK, of course, Elle and Miranda working tirelessly. And once again to Karambu and Sarah, wonderful, thank you so much. I want to also appreciate those who have made donations, because these donations allow us to keep the peace circles that we do in different countries, in 50+ countries. We keep it free and open to all, so that there's no discrimination, of those who can afford and those who cannot afford. Your donations make it possible for all to participate.